Thank you, Tanya. It's great to join all of you. I'm Carrie McCann from the Build Initiative. I'm co-director of our state services, and in Danielle's absence, I'm here to moderate the conversation with my colleagues, Kim Dahl, the executive director of the Tribal Child Care Association of California, also known as TCCAC, and Benoni Pantoja who is the education director at the Saigon Band of the Kumeyaay Nation. And we would like to acknowledge that Sarah Neville Morgan pre-recorded some responses for us, and she is the deputy superintendent of the Opportunities for All branch at the California Department of Education. And to get us started, Kim is going to open us up with a land acknowledgement, and then I'll kick us off with our first question.
Hello, everybody. So glad to be here, to be a part of this group and be able to talk with you all today. So I do want to acknowledge the National Native American Heritage Month. And as TCCAC does, we really like to be able to open up with a land acknowledgement. This land acknowledgement is specific for TCCAC, but would like to really just make sure that everybody understands how important it is for us to recognize the Indigenous peoples of the lands. The Tribal Child Care Association of California is honored to present this land acknowledgement. We understand and acknowledge our place on Native lands and are mindful of the past and present participation in colonial legacies. As an association comprised of tribal members and representatives that partner with more than 80 Native American tribes in California, we stand in solidarity with all Indigenous communities and strive for a cultural consciousness, respect Indigenous practices, and take responsibility to amplify Indigenous voices. Thank you.
Kim and Benoni, it's so great for you to join us today. You know, I met TCCAC several years ago as part of Project Hope. And, you know, we were at the end of it, we were like, why did we call it a project? Because it was really a way of trying to approach and be with each other and the work. You know, when we started it out, we were really asking states to come join us who wanted to really take on a shift from a deficit way of thinking to a culture of well-being. We really wanted to bring multiple state agencies together under shared goals to really reflect on how could we leverage existing programs and dollars, engage families and communities in a different way, and really make them a partner in shifting how those dollars and programs are used. So it really supports their well-being and addresses the needs that they view that they have. And what I was really struck by our learning in that work with all of you is that you came to us and said, we don't really want to think about system building between state agencies. We really want to think about the systems and what we're building between tribal nations and the Department of Education to benefit young children and their families. And so you were already on a path when we met you for that work. You did a lot of work together during Project Hope, and then you've continued to grow and change from when that project ended a few years ago. So Kim, I was wondering if you could kick us off with giving people a little bit of context of who is TCCAC and how do you think about this work?
Thank you so much, Carrie. So I'm Kim Nall. I'm the executive director at the Tribal Child Care Association of California. I'm also a co-founder. I have been in the field of early learning and care since about 1988, so a very long time ago, but I worked with tribal child care first in 2003. Prior to 2003, I owned my own state licensed center in California for about 8-9 years. And so I came to a place of working for the tribe as a consultant in Calusa Indian Community Council, the Cochille Band of Wintun Indians, which is in Northern California, and came without a lot of prior knowledge. My business partner, she was a descendant of the tribe. So she made the connection and said, if you're opening up a center, I think that you should hire Kim. And so I went into the field thinking that the same resources that I had as a private state licensed center, that I would also have working on the reservation for a tribe. And that wasn't the case at all. I couldn't access the simplest things that I thought were just a given, which would be like the food program. I couldn't have the resource and referral locally refer our program. We didn't have any alternative payment subsidy referred into our program either. And I couldn't even use the state's background clearance. And all because we were tribally licensed and not state licensed. So from the very start, I ran up against this wall of a barrier to access resources that would really help the children in the community to be able to meet their needs. And so I just kind of sat back and kind of thought, what can I do? What is it that I can do? I have to rethink everything that I knew. And, knocking on doors and telling people, having a travel license is equivalent to a state license. You don't, all of the things in the education, and it still really didn't get us anywhere. So in search of resources that would benefit the American Indian Native American community that I was serving, I found the Tribal Child Care and Development Fund. So that really gave access to other individuals that were like-minded doing the work that I was doing for a tribal community. And around that time, Race to the Top funds also came to California, and the Tribal Child Care Association was not yet formed, but the group of us that came together and talked really wondered why the tribes couldn't access the state's QRIS system. So we decided as a grassroots organization that we would come together and we'd create our own. Despite funding, despite anything, we just decided that we would just come together and we would have conversations. And with the support of Region 9, and which is the ACF region for CCDF that we are a part of, they help facilitate a conversation with the California Department of Education. It was not at all the way that we first thought it would happen. We thought it would be collaborative and supportive, and there would be interest in what it is that tribes needed to enhance quality in their programming for early learning and care. And it was more of a come to the table, this is what the state does, and drive safe. So it was really not what we expected at all. So after a while, we were so appreciative of this space, but in their defense, they didn't know either what was needed, how we could converse, what was best practice. So it jumped forward several years, and we decided in 2006 to form TCCAC officially, the Tribal Child Care Association of California. And it was developed with just those volunteers. We all had full-time jobs, and we just did it as just a way for us to expand our opportunities and resources and relationships. Again, I'm going to fast forward a little bit more. Throughout this process, there were some changes in the state, and there were other people that championed, but Sarah Neville Morgan really stands out as a champion. And she really asked what it is that we really wanted to do and what we needed to do. And we continue to meet at the state and federal locations. And a lot of the tribes are coming from very marginalized rural areas, and going to San Francisco to the federal building was really quite the feat, managing the streets and the parking and going through the security. It was very, very different for many of them. And then we started meeting at the federal building in Sacramento, and it still really felt like it wasn't a culturally responsive approach to a venue. So Jolene Whipple, who is our culture chair and was also a founder of TCCAC, brought up the idea that it makes more sense for us to meet on tribal land. And after some negotiation, because we were getting a little bit of support from central office at ACF Administration for Children and Families, we were able to negotiate the space and the venue for those quarterly meetings to occur on tribal land. The first meeting that we had was in Colusa, where I worked, and we formed our association formally with electing a board of directors and officers. And I laugh because we elected a treasurer, but we didn't even have any money. And so that person was like very happy that everybody volunteered to be the treasurer because they knew that it would be like really no work. so so really kind of fast forwarding a little bit more. About 5, 6 years ago, the pandemic makes this like strange space in my memory. And there was I came across my desk that there was an application that was called Project Hope. And maybe we could pull up those slides too of the North Star, if we don't mind. And I thought, wow, this is an opportunity for us to really work with well, first of all, I called them and I called them, and I think it might have been Bill that was my contact. And I said, can we apply as the Tribal Child Care Association of California? And they said, well, you have to have a state partner. And so I'm like, okay, who could we partner with? So I was in collaboration at the time because we were co-chairs between myself and Dion Wood with a Cradle tribe. And he's like, are you sure? Does this make sense? We really want to have a formal partnership with the state. And I said, well, it really could be beneficial if we do it in the right way. So I contacted friends and colleagues at California Department of Education, Stephanie Myers and Sarah Neville Morgan. And lo and behold, they were having kind of the same conversation behind the scenes. So we're like, let's do it. So we applied for Project Hope. And I don't even know, Carrie, how many states applied, but in the end, they selected 3, and California was one. And so we came together to talk about our North Star. And on your screen, you should see, what our vision, our North Star of what the work between California Department of Education and TCCAC is and was. Building trust and partnership to expand access and quality of early learning and care for Native children, supporting local level system building for tribal childcare, and bringing the voices of the tribal communities to the state, and in turn, increasing the access to culturally appropriate materials and traditions for Native children. And I'll let Carrie speak to this as well, only because one of the first things that we really did after our coming together and visioning together was deciding on what community we'll visit in order to do a beneficiary voice visit. And that was one of the first things we did. But I'll pause, Carrie, because you might have other questions or something you want to add.
Yeah, no, I think you really captured the history and where we all came together as you have been building the association to really address the needs of tribes. Their work as often separately funded from federal resources around CCDF. So they're supporting voucher and programs that their tribes are our own, kind of your experience at Calusa. And how has that then expanded into all your workforce efforts, which really brings you in front of this community of practice? And I was thinking, for context, Benoni, if you want to just kind of share who your tribe is, how it's committed to education, and how does that show up in their early childhood space, then maybe we could turn to Kim's slides around the workforce pathways work and discuss that.
Perfect. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Benoni Pantoja. I'm the director of the Suquan Band of the Kumeyaay Nation here in San Diego County. Fun fact, San Diego County is the county with the largest reservations within its county. There's 18 federally recognized reservations here, tribes and nations. And it's exciting to do the work, connecting and collaborating with others. Specifically with TCCAC, it was serendipitous. A couple years ago, when you're open to the creator and the universe, things start to align, and we were in need of professional development support. So I would focus on professional development, collaboration, and networking. Like, those are things that we needed as an organization. So here at Suquan, we have a infant, toddler, and preschool center. We have a K-5 center, and middle school and high school and young adult center. And through that work, we're always trying to look for ways and opportunities to support our staff and have that 360 lens. Like, how do we impact, all stakeholders, but specifically being student-centered. And the professional development component of TCCAC was just, the timing was just perfect. As a director administrator, I just finished doing a cohort through the Thrive program that they had last year, participated in a lot of the workshops and conferences and trainings through the workforce pathways. I know our staff are highly involved in that as well, from, trauma-informed practices to STEM, learning about STEM. We even brought one of the STEM speakers that we heard at the TCAC conferences and had her come to our facility to teach our staff, to really explore that idea of curiosity and letting that flourish and bloom. So the excitement around professional development for me as an administrator was really, really beneficial, because it put the tools and really aligned with our 5 Ps. I'm going to throw it here in the chat. But the 5 Ps, that kind of the framework that we were trying to do here, that we're doing here as an organization, is focusing on purpose. How do we tap into purpose and intrinsic motivation? Preservation of cultural language and sovereignty, personalized learning. How do we personalize learning? Pathways, cradle to career. What does that look like? And then project for the future. So those are the 5P framework that we've been kind of building our SMART goals around, our initiatives around, and TCAC happened to be a big piece of that puzzle to help with the professional development. Because in theory, these sound great. It looks good on a little, sticker, but you have to implement it. And you can't implement it without professional development, without collaboration, without networking. So we've networked with different agencies from the state, federal, and regional, from the California Department of Education, from LIF, First Five, YMCA, San Diego County Office of Ed, Department of Education of California. So it's been really beneficial for us and our staff, but more importantly, our students, because that sprinkles down to our students. And then the next wave really is to support our families even more through this professional development, collaboration, and network opportunities that we have.
Thank you, Bioni. And I think, Daisy, as you get the clip ready to share Sarah's kind of opening and perspective from a state leader, I think what you offer in your 5 Ps is really a demonstration of a parallel process that is happening in California, where as an individual tribal nation, you have your 5 Ps, you have these things that you want to make sure happen. TCCAC has slightly different language, but it's the same kind of concept. So there's really thinking as an association across tribes, how do you support each other in your purpose, your preservation, your professional learning? All of those I see, Kim, you doing in one way or another with your partners at the association. And then we'll hear from Sarah, who's trying to think about how can the state resources be used differently so that these kinds of things can be supported across the state. So Daisy, can we just share a clip so people have a sense of the interview we did with Sarah when we found out she couldn't join us today?
Sure. Here we go. This is Sarah Neville Morgan, the Deputy Superintendent of the Opportunities for All branch at the California Department of Education.
First and foremost, I just really need to thank you for giving me this opportunity to participate in this event and to share not just CDE's story, but also my personal journey in this space. So as we're talking today, I'm honored and grateful to be here on traditional lands. I'm coming from the land of the Patwin people, and today there are 3 federally recognized Patwin tribes: the Kachil Dihi Band of the Wintu Indians, of the Calusa Indian Community, the Quetzal Dihi Wintun Nation, and Yoka Dihi Wintun Nation. So honoring all of them and the fact that we are on their land. I also have to do a quick shout out to Stephanie Myers, who supports me in this space always. And actually, I bring her name into this because she is so critical to what we've done at CDE and what I've done personally in this space. So Stephanie is a member of the Klamath tribe, but she also works for the California Department of Education and is a personal friend. So somebody who I really respect and honor in this space. So what has that look like? I will say that CDE, or the California Department of Education, does have a tribal education liaison for our American Indian Education Oversight Committee. But this historically has always been focused on our K-12 system. And separately in our early ed division, we had some connections with tribes, but I would say it was inconsistent and not as forefront. Like, it wasn't always there. It wasn't something we thought of in all of our RFAs, fundings, technical assistance partnerships, until we had Project Hope. And Project Hope is what truly brought us together. And having that application come out from Build, and then Stephanie saw it and she's like, Sarah, what do you think? And I was like, yes, I was already thinking the same thing. Let's see if the Tribal Child Care Association of California, or TCCAC, wants to engage with us at all. And then Kim Nall, who is wonderful and amazing in that space, responded to us, and she was thinking some of the same things. So that set us on this new journey. I personally had always wanted to work more with tribes, not just in CDE, but as I looked across equity and looked across our space and what really resonates in communities and with children, I thought it was critical. So now at this point, I can't imagine our work without the partnership that we've had with TCCAC, without leaning into this deep equity space and what I call with my team a learner's stance. So I will eternally be thankful to the leadership of TCCAC and their persistence, their determination in getting us at the department to listen and learn. I talk a lot about Dion and how he knocked and knocked at our door, and we finally just opened it. So not only did they have to knock down our walls and our barriers that we put up as state agencies, but we had to learn how to enter their space and be gracious, be so excited that they had invited us to it, and then listen and learn. Not just pop in, give an update and leave, but truly be in community with our tribes. So I call it a true changing of hearts and minds that have moved us to act in a different way. So I don't know if I'm supposed to do this in this part, but my recommendation to all of you who are joining this session today is to listen, to lean in, to change, and to act, to listen sooner than we did at CDE. How critical this work is, how our tribal communities and our American Indian Native children should not wait for us to be responsive to their needs, but really follow, lift up their direction and lead.
So that's a segment of an interview that Sarah did for us, and you'll have access to the full almost 14-minute interview. She answers 5 questions. But Kim, I think she shares your opening story from her perspective, and I'm really struck by some of the things that she shared later in the interview. Continue to reinforce that relationship building is not a one-time event. It's an ongoing year in, year out of how they show up in your space. She talks about including the tribes in the discussion of what they need and want, and how does that guide what the state should be doing. And that she worked to discover that one of the investigations in Project Hope is she had to learn about a funding stream and found out she could shift how she was using at the time, the CCDF money to support quality improvement efforts, to really have concerted efforts with the tribes. And that's where some resources became available around a tribal quality improvement system, the development of some of your workforce pathways work. So I was wondering if this is a good time to kind of tie this kind of arc of the work to things that you're specifically doing in the workforce that Benoni gave us a little preview to.
Yes, thank you so much, Carrie. And, one of the things that I think is so important to note is that through Project Hope, we made a deeper connection. It's a connection that was much more built on the relationship and understanding and trust building and vulnerability. And that really helped us to be able to expand this work and the vision that we had created together for our North Star. But having those champions at the state level in the leadership role had a huge impact on what we're doing today. And be careful what you wish for, because like I said, I was working, full time, and so was Dion. And we had a few other board members, Jolene Whipple and David Smith Ferry, and we're working really hard behind the scenes as well in our spare time. And then all of a sudden, through Project Hope and asking the questions that Sarah did about funding and really building a framework of where we wanted to see our North Star go, she was able to get a set aside of funds for the state's QCC, Quality Counts California, quality rating improvement system funds, and be able to take some of those funds and shift it to the TCCAC to do our own tribal quality improvement system. And when the Race to the Top funds didn't come through the state to the tribes, we already had started developing our own tribal quality improvement system with our grassroots approach, with bringing tribes together quarterly, meeting over a period of 2.5 days. And generally their tribes supported their travel in order for us to do it. In the beginning, there was a little bit of seed money that came from ACF at central office to be able to support some of the work that we did. But then when we were able to get the QIS funds, I laugh because, all of a sudden it's like we're doing this work and it's so important, and it's so, it was so monumental in the work that I did every day, also at the center, running Early Head Start Childcare Partnership and a CCTR infant toddler contract with the state and the tribal center and tribal CCDF. All of these things were interwoven into the work that I did to increase quality. And then all of a sudden we were like, oh, we're going to have a set aside. We're going to give you this money to do your tribal quality improvement system to take it to the next level. And we were like, oh, we don't even have like official staff or a bank account. So we had to scramble to really think about how we were going to do this. And so we took our time with it, though, because we needed to bring in people to advise us in order for us to do it right. We hired a pro bono attorney. We took a look at, applying for nonprofit status. And we were at that time a 501c4, and we shifted to a 501c3. We updated our bylaws, we expanded our board, and we hired our first staff person. So there were a lot of things that happened. And then in the meantime, we also got a set aside of PDG funds, Quality Counts California Workforce Funds, and also First 5 Impact Funds. So we grew very quickly. Our TCCAC workforce pathways is something that we've developed over the last 2.5 years. And these are the pathways that we have in place now. And what was really important to TCCAC in working with our membership, which we are a membership association, and every tribe in California has the potential to have a voting member that represents their organization and their early learning and care and education programs to vote. And what we heard back was this health and safety was still a really ongoing issue, especially when thinking about family, friend, and neighbor, relative care providers, family child care homes, to support them specifically in their needs. And then also STEM and STEAM, that became a very popular subject that we had introduced during a conference. So they wanted more of that. Engaging families and tribal communities in an intentional manner. We worked with community and parent cafe model, and we were able to use that training model to adapt it to tribal communities and make it really inclusive of more of a talking circle, and to bring in families in intentional ways that met that community's specific goals. And yes, Liz, I will in just a moment. I'll go ahead and bring that back up. And then the Cradle Board to Toddling is in partnership with the Program for Infant and Toddler Care. And the Cultural Humility is just right now being launched. And that is a training that we're doing in partnership with the California Early Childhood Mentor Program that we also have an initiative with that we'll be implementing. And we'll also be using that as a way to bring in that cultural humility training to the coaches and the mentors that work at the state levels and local levels so that we can be expanding those relationships. Wellness and healing has to do with trauma-informed care and a strength-based approach. And early learning leadership is part of our tribal quality improvement system, where we work with the administrators at the tribes for early learning and help them to create their community needs assessments and goals that are needed to be able to move the work forward in their communities. So the approximate how long has this whole process taken from idea to inception? We started in 2005 and we became TCCAC in 2006. And right before the what year was Project Hope? Was it 2019?
May 2018.
2018 is when we actually did a collaborative approach with the state in the joint application. And then, so we started getting funding in 2019. So that, I hope that timeline gives you a better idea, Liz. It took a while. And then, Carrie, I know you wanted to bring Benoni back in, so I'll pause.
Yeah, and the Workforce Pathways work of offering all of this kind of training and support to early care and ed workforce. Benoni, maybe you could describe what kind of workforce is participating, and then Kim, if you think he's representative, or if you think your audience is broader.
Yeah, so the Workforce Pathways, I mean, what I love about it is that each of our staff members met personally to set up their own professional goals. So it's individualized. There's a personalization with that. So Sarah has met with each of them and myself even, so that we can create what are the pathways, what are the courses, what are our goals, and then try to align them. So there was, in the sense of like almost like a needs assessment in the beginning, and then it's personalized and then it's met. So some of our staff has participated a lot in the STEM training, the cultural components of things, health and safety. So it's all over the board. And then when we have our staff meetings, they come back, they share out and so forth. So there's this whole domino effect of getting the resources and development and then bringing them back to the center. So that's been really excited work. That recently I just finished, I believe I shared earlier, on the Thrive cohort. So it was a leadership development program for a selective few that wanted to participate and commit to it. and as we committed to it, we went through training on, DISC training, kind of burnout inventory, perseverance, resiliency. So it was very impactful just for me, and kind of growing and then bringing that back to my staff, because I'll be kind of regurgitating some of the stuff I learned and just recycling it and giving it to our staff on the 14th for our professional development. So I think overall the Workforce Pathways has been beneficial, not just last year, but even this year as well, seeing our staff kind of buy in even more to it.
And I'll just piggyback. Thank you so much, Benoni. Your guys' partnership has been really awesome. You guys have bought it full on. And so we also work with family, friend, and neighbor, or relative care providers. They're able to go through the pathways, as well as family child care homes. So the majority of our group is tribal CCDF Child Care and Development Fund grantees, but there also are partners that do not receive that federal funding and operate early Head Start, or privately. So we work with all programming, and our advisor for workforce meets with every individual in the workforce and does a professional development plan annually. And then we also do what is called iPinwheel, which is our platform that we use in the state of California to track professional development and training, and also our stipends. So every individual that goes through the application process, does a professional development plan, is eligible to receive stipends for their particular pathway and goals. They could do higher education and be working towards an education goal. They could be doing professional development, which is often the case of our providers that aren't in centers, especially, and work towards certification certification. They could be working towards a teacher permit as well. And so we support that through our trainings. So each month we have a training calendar, and there are all of those different trainings that were available through the pathways that are mapped out for the year, for the fiscal year, for the workforce. And so that is something that is been an ongoing process of development based off of input from the workforce. So we've just recently, we meet 3 times a year in person, and the rest of it is virtual. And those workforce days have now moved to Saturdays. So when we meet quarterly is what we used to do, but now we meet 3 times a year. We have a membership day. So there'll be a time where we meet with our membership and get input, or it might be a vote or bylaw change. And then we also meet as a roundtable that we include all of our state partners. So it'd be state partners from all of the different departments, California Department of Ed, Department of Social Services, First Five, Health and Human Services, Indian Health Services, so many others that I mean, it's grown to a group about 150. And then we have a workforce day. Right now, we have almost 200 workforce participants enrolled that are across the state that work specifically with tribal childcare and early learning programming. It's been quite successful. We use our culture committee to be able to customize the resources in order for us to take things like, say, the program for infant and toddler care. And when we do Cradle board to toddling, it might be brought in with support materials that have been sourced with local tribes that might have some literacy materials or some developmental materials that we include. So most of our partners have been willing to customize. We're working with the infant early childhood mental health consulting to work on coaching and mentoring and support for infant early childhood mental health. And we're also customizing kits for that that will include literacy materials and social emotional materials that are relevant to the tribes. We have a culture committee that helps us look at all of the literacy materials and learning materials. And also our membership is great in giving input at our membership meetings. We also have the culture committee and events committees, and they help meet on a regular basis to advise. We have a board of 9 and a staff of 4. I left Calusa Indian Community Council last April to come on as the full-time executive director. Huge move for me. Love direct service, love the families, the children, the teachers, but it was really an important time for me to be able to take on this work and help take it to the next level. We have such a core group and foundation of people to do the work, and our partnerships have just blossomed in just such a huge way. The intentionality of them wanting to come learn more about how to work with sovereign nations, how to use consultation in a meaningful way. We sometimes say big C, little c. Little c is when you're going to TCCAC and you're talking and just kind of getting information and sharing. And that's not true consultation as a government to government. Consultation would be tribal leadership to the organization leadership. And so we're working on that. We're working on ways that we can support that and give input. And there's 109 tribes that are federally recognized in California, and of those, we work with about 88 of them. So we still hope to expand beyond that. And I just can't say enough about this growth. It actually has been pretty phenomenal. And at times I was like, whoa, pump the brakes. It's like, it's going really fast. Yet we have to decide how fast we want to go. And we've learned to say that. To stay intentional, to make sure that our cultural lens for the work is there, that we're not rushing, and that we're making sure that the things that are important to think about, relationships, Mother Earth, the messages that we need to ingrain in the work that we do with the providers and the children and the families, that their voices are a part of everything that we do. And I'll pause because I could go on forever.
Kim, as you talk about those things, I was wondering if that's part of the lens of why you decided as an association a couple of years ago to start offering workforce association. Because I was wondering, like, maybe our audience would see those topics and say, aren't those topics already being offered by other organizations in California? So I didn't know if you wanted to just share why the association chose to start offering it, or what's the angle when you see that it might be overlap, how it's not really overlap.
Sure. And if you don't mind pulling up the principal slide, the principals help guide our work. And that's something that we've done through after we got done. We're never done with Project Hope, because you're never done with hope, right? You just plant a seed and hope you water it and it keeps growing. And so we were able to retain and work with Bill to do a 2-year strategic plan with TCCAC, and to really dig into what our North Star is, what's going to be intentionally embedded in our decision-making process. And that's where the group, the TCCAC Board of Directors and membership and leadership came up with these principles. And so this is how we guide our work. And like I've said, the expansion has gone beyond the California Department of Education. And of course, with some transitions to initiatives over to the California Department of Social Services, we've really are creating that deeper, meaningful relationship with CDSS now. So the work that we learned through Project Hope now can be applicable to the work that we do with CDSS. And it helped us because a lot of that work had been done. And then it gives us a framework, if you will. And then we work with First 5 California, and we work with California community colleges. And a lot of the tribes have been so monumental in their support of our cultural goals and trainings and teachings that, they've brought in that grounding ourselves in the elders' wisdom and making sure that we're elevating voices of the tribal communities and honoring and preserving our traditions. If you've ever been to an event, and I've seen a couple of familiar faces on some of these COPs that just today, that some of you may have, but people say, and we just did a presentation yesterday to some of our partners at the Quality Counts California's. They're like, it's like no other event you've ever gone to, because as soon as you walk in the door, you feel like you've entered into a family, and that you're there for self-healing and self-care, but also to share experiences and knowledges that walks in a side by side, and not one person pulling the other along when they're not ready, but truly being intentional and purposeful in learning and listening. And so that's how our bridging of the diverse beliefs and practices within our cultures has occurred, is with that intentionality at the state level, but also with the openness and the purposefulness at the tribal level, to look at past grievances and historical trauma and have open and honest discussions about it and call it out, and then start to heal. And I think that is such an important part of this work, is to hear from the people in the communities and what it meant to them when these things occurred and happened that were very impactful, and they don't just go away. People might have not been there when it happened, but it still stays, and it's still ingrained, and it's still part of your genetic makeup. And if your family has experienced that, and it's important to hear that and understand. And I'll pause.
Yeah, in our last few minutes, I think I'll have 2 questions. One is, I realized one of the things we haven't gotten to yet is to highlight some of the policy changes this work has generated, and I didn't know if you wanted to share just a couple of examples of changes, and then we'll close out our conversations with both of you about your vision for the future.
Yeah, and I'll answer it, but only if you think of something, please jump in, so then you can do the dreaming. I love your dreaming. I think that the policy changes have been so impactful in how you look at working with the tribes and meeting the individual sovereign nations' needs, and really hearing what that looks like. And one of the things that we have really found, if, for instance, when you do a partnership with a grant, is that before you even sign on the dotted line, you need to understand what that means for sustainability. How can you sustain this? Do you have the workforce that's available to you to support, and the knowledge and the level of expertise to be able to implement? And if not, can you have a conversation about a planning period in order to work towards that? Because that, I think, is the hardest part for a lot of tribes, is to not, obviously the larger tribes are the ones that have had a lot more grant initiatives come into their programs outside of tribal grants. They might have some of that, but the smaller tribes or tribes that are not very in resource deserts, if you will, they're not familiar with how to navigate some of those other things that it almost sets you up to fail. Like, here's some money, now fix everything. Doesn't work that way. You know, it needs to be looked at of where's your capacity? Where do you want to grow? What resources are there to help you grow? And how can we support that and help you to get to where you need to be? And that's what TCCAC does, is that, you know, we're there to talk and listen and learn and provide what's needed. So some of those policy changes have happened. And you listen to Sarah's video, she'll go into more depth, but language is really important. Meeting people where they're at and having conversations. And I know we're running out of time, but I'll give you a quick example. When we worked with the Early Head Start Child Care Partnership with the state of California, we didn't have the standalone, but with the state partnership, we really called out the importance of traditional practices for parenting and caregiving, and things like, you know, like a cradle basket for somebody that is monitoring your program that doesn't have that knowledge. To say that's not a safe practice is not a respectful approach. And to be able to hear why a cradle basket could be a safe and promising practice for the infants in your care and how that could be made into a safe practice is a conversation that could be really important to bridging that understanding and also respecting and acknowledging the health and safety practices that have been in place and work. So that's just one example.
Yeah, no, we'll end with that. But I as a teaser for people who have follow-up questions for us after today, is there's been changes in RFP language. So that's not asking tribes to divulge their entire budget, but just the budget that's related to their early care and ed program, or an attempt to move that. Your thing about trying to add planning time to awards of grants, the fact that there is a recognized tribal quality improvement system. They're currently working on cost modeling and the true cost of care in California, and they saw the TCCAC community as an important community come to gain perspective about what that means and how do they think about it. ACF has come to TCCAC to get input on the tribal CCDF RFP itself, or the state, what would be the equivalent of the state plan for states for tribal nations. So you see that it's, I think you're right, Kim, that you're starting to get more requests than you can cope with, almost, because once you make progress in one area, other people start to see places. So why don't we end with the last question for both of you of what's your vision for the future, or what's a next step that you would highlight for this community of practice that's focused on our early care and ed workforce?
Benoni?
I'd say for us, the vision is to continue the work that we've been doing to build off our 5 Ps, and then our mission, you know, our mission statement, really to empower our youth. So that would be one. I think incorporating and increasing our parent engagement. I think that's another component of it. It's always tricky, but to find ways and creative ways to do that. And I know with TCAC, we've, you know, the parent cafes, there's been many resources and opportunities, but for us, I think the timing of getting that moving forward and building forward. And then and I would say too, also working with our students who, you know, are being identified at early ages, are showing the signs of neurodiversity, and seeing how can we support and bring those resources in to support the family and the student. So because placement is always, you know, a tricky issue, but we have to do what's best for the child and put them at the center of every discussion. So that's something, you know, in our mind, and then, you know, continuing the work of supporting one another. So thank you for this time.
Great, thank you.
And, you know, I said this earlier, I think so many of our dreams have come true. Like, I could have never imagined that this could have happened, that I would have left, you know, the Calusa Indian community and come on as executive director just because we had so much work that was happening. So that dream has come true. the dreaming that I still have is just to, continue to have those local voices from the tribes at the local, local child care planning councils and at the state level to help impact policy. We do have some of that, but continue to have a diverse group of parents and providers and teachers and administrators from tribal communities that can bring their voice to help impact. And then I laugh about this, but more staff, because we have the whole state of California, several initiatives, and there's, 4 of us that are doing it, but it's a huge job and one that I wouldn't change for a million years. But there's times where you have to say no. And I'm learning that because my team laughs because I'm not a no person. I'm like, oh yeah, we could do that. But now I have to be like, oh, we have to be careful if we're going to do that. So, making sure that we have the capacity ourselves to do the work that we take on, and continue this beautiful work and working with the tribes. And I love it.
Well, Benoni and Kim, we really appreciate your time today. Adra, I'll turn it back over to you for the small group process.